Hello, friends. The 1197th day of the war between Russia and Ukraine continues. The most dynamic section of the front is now in the Sumy region. There, the Russians captured the villages of Kindrativka and Popovo-Lezhachi, the military telegram channel Deep State reports. They also advanced between Belovody and Lochnia. The Russian Defense Ministry also announced the capture of Kindrativka. Ukrainian telegram channels confirm only the enemy's entry into the village. And they write about the probable loss of Oleksievka. Deep State, commenting on Russia's advance, writes that the Russians have approached Sumy to the range of FPV drone strikes on fiber optics, and such attempts have already been made. Our military telegram channel reports that Russian troops are advancing thanks to the superior number of infantry. And also, I will add, superiority in drones, which military experts have been increasingly writing about lately. Despite the daily advance of the Russians in the Sumy region, the Ukrainian armed forces continue to attack in the Tetkino area in the Kursk region. This is written about by Ukrainian and Russian military telegram channels. The attacks are being carried out by one of the most famous assault units of the Ukrainian army, the 225th Separate Assault Regiment. In particular, it announced the clearing of a Russian company's stronghold near Tetkino. Russian military telegram channels write that attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces are taking place in several areas near the border. And they write that the Ukrainian army is advancing towards the village of Popovo-Lezhachi. They believe that in this way, Ukrainian troops want to block Tetkino from the east. On today's Deep State map, a gray zone has approached Popovo-Lezhachi. Let me remind you that Tetkino is initially an inconvenient location for defense, since it is surrounded on three sides by the Ukrainian border. Therefore, the Ukrainian armed forces have been trying to cut off this ledge since the beginning of the Kursk operation. Attacks here intensified again last month. More and more data is coming in about the real damage to Russian strategic aviation airbases that Ukraine inflicted on June 1. According to satellite images from Planet Labs for June 4, which are published by the Radio Liberty Project, 7 aircraft were damaged at the Belaya Airfield in Irkutsk. At the same time, Radio Liberty, citing an analysis of video and satellite images, states that 12 Russian aircraft were destroyed at all the airfields attacked. This figure, 12 aircraft, is much less than the official data of the Security Service of Ukraine, about 41 damaged or destroyed aircraft. It is interesting that the General Staff of Ukraine also gave a figure of 12 confirmed aircraft hits yesterday morning, but later corrected its report, adding 41 aircraft. Returning to the video published by the Security Service of Ukraine, it shows unprotected Russian bombers, which has already caused indignation in some Russian military telegram channels and calls to punish the Russian military leadership for this. At the same time, experts write that the lack of shelters for aircraft is a condition of the Nuclear Arms Limitation Treaty between Russia and the United States. According to this treaty, both countries are obliged to keep strategic bombers in open, visible space for satellites. The number of such aircraft is recorded in the treaty and must be open for monitoring. Those bombers that were hit had to be visible due to obligations under the nuclear treaty. Zelensky took advantage of this, wrote former Trump National Security Advisor, General Michael Flynn. Very expensive U.S. strategic bombers can be destroyed in the same way by anyone with access to inexpensive drones, delivery trucks, explosives, and a little technical knowledge, he added. Zelensky today confirmed that one of the goals of Ukraine's strikes on Russian airfields was to show Washington that Kiev still has cards in its hands in the war and is capable of resisting and delivering painful blows to Russia. The rhetoric that the Ukrainians are losing the war, that we have no cards, and so on, it sounds a little quieter now. I say this very carefully, because our team is now in the United States and the mood has changed in political circles, Zelensky said. A number of Western media outlets are pursuing a similar line. Their goal is to encourage Trump to continue helping Kiev and to increase pressure on Russia, including introducing new sanctions. At the same time, other assessments are being made. Thus, Trump's former advisor Steve Bannon actually accused Kiev of trying to drag the United States into a nuclear war with Russia. Let me remind you that an attack on strategic bombers, according to Russia's nuclear doctrine, is grounds for the use of nuclear weapons. We are being dragged into a possible Third World War, which overshadows the first two. The White House said that they were not aware of the Ukrainians' plans. They simply went and attacked Russia's nuclear triad. The country that we sponsor and with which we make deals is now dragging us into its war. They think they can attack Russian territory and drag us into a conflict with Russia, Bannon said. Although not in such harsh terms, Trump's special representative Kellogg also expressed concern about a possible escalation after the airfield strikes. The level of risk is significantly increased. After what happened this weekend. People need to understand that, in the area of national security, when you attack part of the opponent's national survival system, your level of risk increases because you don't know how they're going to respond. It's absolutely clear that the level of risk will increase, and I think that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to get to a situation where the risk levels are not increased, Kellogg said. In general, in Washington, even during Biden's time, one of the defining positions in policy towards the war in Ukraine was the topic of preventing the start of a direct military conflict between America and Russia due to nuclear risks. At the same time, even then, a number of American officials unofficially suggested in comments to the media that Zelensky is trying to drag us into a war with Russia. Among Trump supporters, the latter point of view is even more widespread, along with the theses, "We will not let America be drawn into World War III. This is not our war. It is more important for us to restore relations with Russia than to save Ukraine at the risk of war with Russia. Our main enemy is China, and we must concentrate our forces on it, and therefore we need to withdraw from our obligations to the war in Ukraine as soon as possible," and so on. And the strike on Russia's strategic bombers gives supporters of these theses new arguments to convince Trump not to continue aiding Ukraine and not to introduce new sanctions against Russia, since Kiev wants to draw us into a nuclear war and the risk is becoming prohibitive. If Trump takes this point of view, then the enormous efforts that the Ukrainian authorities and Europeans are currently spending to convince Washington of the need to support Ukraine and increase pressure on Russia will go to waste. And in this case, the current strike on the planes will be similar to last year's operation of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kursk region. Tactically, it was very bright, but strategically it went to the negative, dispersing Ukrainian reserves, which led to the acceleration of the advance of Russian troops with the subsequent loss of the Kursk bridgehead itself. While I was preparing this material, it became known that Trump spoke on the phone with Putin. Putin, according to Trump, said that he will have to respond to Kiev's attack on Russian strategic aviation airfields. At the same time, he called his conversation good, but not one that will lead to immediate peace. I just finished a phone conversation with Russian President Putin. The conversation lasted about 1 hour and 15 minutes. We discussed the Ukrainian attack on docked Russian aircraft, as well as various other attacks that are happening on both sides. It was a good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace. President Putin actually said, and very decisively, that he will have to respond to the recent attack on the airfields, Trump wrote. From this conversation, we can conclude that Trump was the first to announce to the world that Putin would respond very decisively to the attack on Russian military airfields. Let me remind you that Putin himself did not comment on this. Trump did not express any condemnation of Putin's intention to respond to the strikes on the airfields. He did not threaten sanctions or other measures. On the contrary, he called the conversation good, although he admitted that there would be no immediate peace in Ukraine. Overall, it looks like Trump actually made it clear that Putin's strike in response to the attack on the airfields would not lead to any harsh US reaction towards Russia.
Friends, I want to develop and strive for higher quality content, but my 2009 computer does not allow me to do this. If you have the opportunity to help me buy a new computer and make my dream come true, I will be very grateful to you. You will find the link in the description under the video and in the pinned comment. Thank you very much and see you in the next video.